So, you want to start drawing digitally? There's a whole world of tools, softwares, and opinions out there, and so I'm here to help you narrow it down. My name is Melanie. I'm an illustrator and I like to design characters. And although I started drawing using a pencil and paper, nowadays I mainly use digital mediums to create my art. So let's take a look at some of the tools you might use to start out. The variety is endless. Your options range from screenless drawing pads like the Wacom tablets that hook up to computer screens, all the way to large pieces of tech like the Cintiq that has a huge display for you to draw directly on. And then there are all the accessories you can use. It's important to note that none of these tools necessarily make you a better artist. It's more about your preferences and just the way that you like to work. Many professional artists use a variety of these tools, depending on their lifestyle and personal preferences. First, drawing pads. To sort through all this noise and get to a decision, I would recommend to first identify your budget and then what you already have. Most people who have a smaller budget and have already invested in a personal computer might enjoy a drawing pad that hooks up to it. These tend to be much less expensive than the other kind of drawing pad, ones that include touchscreen displays. They're even typically ergonomically better for you, since you look up at your computer screen with a straight neck and back rather than looking downwards at your touch screen, the way that you would with a sketchbook on a desk. Many professional artists opt for this mode of drawing. If this sounds like a good fit for you, the most popular tools within this category include Wacom tablets, Huion pads, or XP Pen products. In fact, my first digital pad was actually the Wacom Intuos Art, in blue. I was 17, and I named it after a Mass Effect character. On the other hand, a large display tablet can be really intuitive off the bat since you're able to draw directly on it. If you're super focused on refined line work and precise drawing, then the extra coordination you get from working directly on a screen can be especially helpful. Some artists find that being able to see and directly work on their pieces on a larger screen is well worth the price tag. However, while doing my research for this part of the video, I found that many people think that displays are pretty overpriced for their benefits. As one Reddit user put it, don't buy a display tablet because you feel it's needed for you to get better. Consider it only if you strongly prefer to draw directly on the screen. That sounds about right to me. I also wanted to mention this side note in case you're feeling pressured to get the best, most advanced tools. If you're just starting out, there's no reason to drop the coin on a super fancy piece of equipment right away, unless you have the money and want to do that, of course, but you don't need to. The foundations of drawing are a really transferable skill that can be applied to any tool, so it's a good idea to save your money if you can. If you're serious about learning art, save your money and spend your effort on practice and mileage, regardless of the tools. From my own experience, I haven't spent very much time at all using large, pricey drawing displays, and I haven't felt the least bit limited by that. They're definitely pretty cool and very useful pieces of tech, don't get me wrong. But as any professional will tell you, by no means are they necessary for you to become a skilled artist. Okay, the sun caught up with me again, so on to part 2. Thanks for following me around my living room while I run from the sun. One piece of tech that I've personally found to be well worth it was my iPad. It was really intuitive for me, and its portability was a game changer for me when I was working hybrid. It was really helpful to be able to work at coffee shops, but also to whip out my iPad for quick edits during meetings. It just gelled really well with my workflow, which again, is all you really need from your equipment. But for all those pros, there are some cons. For one, an iPad is about the same size and shape as a sketchbook, which comes with its own posture issues that we already touched on. Storage is also a pretty big concern. Where I didn't really need to worry about it on my PC, now I need an iPad with a larger amount of storage so that I can work on bigger pieces with many layers. If you also work using many layers, which is usually necessary if you're planning to get paid to make art for clients, then do keep this in mind. If you like to make animations, doubly keep this in mind. Regardless of which device you choose, an important thing to be aware of is the adjustment period. It's the farthest thing from a deal breaker, but if you're transitioning from paper to a screenless drawing pad, for instance, it might feel strange for a few days since you have to look up at the computer screen and away from your stylus. And vice versa. I'm sure many of you can relate to the experience of trying to zoom in or double tap an imaginary undo button when you go back to using a traditional sketchbook. Alternatively, going from a toothy paper grain to the smooth, glassy surface of a display can be super jarring at first. None of these are reasons to choose any differently, in my opinion. Just don't be discouraged if it feels a little awkward in the beginning when you start drawing digitally. Just keep at it. Part 2. Software. So now that you've got your shiny new toy, what apps are best for you to draw on? While Photoshop has historically been the software that professionals use, I'm not so sure that that's always the case anymore, especially considering that Photoshop requires a hefty monthly subscription. Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, and Krita are a few well-known full-featured contenders that are used by many professional artists, and that's just to name a few. Feel free to take a screenshot. Here's the list of softwares, their prices, and what devices they're compatible with. As far as you're able to, shop around. try a couple free apps and maybe a trial version of a subscription. It's a good idea to settle on a program that supports features like clipping masks and exports high-quality files. It'll take some time to get to know whichever software you end up with, so if there's any chance that this could end up as more than a casual hobby for you, it's worth it to make sure that you're learning on an industry-standard tool from the beginning. Me personally, I used to exclusively use Photoshop until I started using my iPad to draw. Now I pretty much prefer Procreate over everything else, especially because it's a single purchase software, not a subscription. But if Procreate didn't exist, I'd probably check out Clip Studio Paint or Krita first, just based on the praise that I've seen them receive from my colleagues. Part 3. Accessories. Part 3. Accessories. I'll just cut to the chase. Most accessories are pretty niche and kind of unnecessary, so seriously, do not sweat it if you don't have the budget for any of them. But there are a couple that might be genuinely useful to you, and those are the ones that I'll talk about. Remember I mentioned that you might have a hard time adjusting to the smoothness of a screen display? Well, someone thought of that. You can purchase a screen protector that simulates the roughness of real paper. The most well-known brand for this is probably Paperlike, but I've also heard of ESR and Elecom having some really high-quality paper-feel screen protectors. Less of an accessory and more of a need. You do not want to be caught dead without some extra pen nibs. Enough said. Well, I will say more. If you do neglect to replace your pen nib after it wears down, it can affect your line quality and precision. In worst cases, it can even end up with a sharp edge that damages the surface of your drawing tablet. If you have sweaty hands or can't even rest your palm on the screen without it mistaking your hand for the pencil, this could be for you. But maybe you could also just use a sock? It wouldn't be as nice though. As a bit of a cheapskate, I pushed off getting one until this last Christmas, but now that I have it, I do really enjoy it. It's helped to stop those annoying little accidental marks that end up in the corners of your canvas that are a result of your palm kind of registering as your stylus. If you've tried one of these, let me know if you like it. Mini keyboards seem silly until you want to quickly change your brush size or hate double tapping your Apple Pen to change from an eraser to a pencil. It's a really cool way to map your favorite hotkeys and keep them right next to each other. The fun thing about this is that there are loads of different price points because there are loads of different types. I don't have one personally, but I could see it being really useful, especially for another iPad user or a large display tablet user. This one's pretty specific to iPad users, but boy does it help. Get yourself a case with a keyboard. Not only will it protect your iPad from scuffs and hold it up at a more ergonomic angle for you, but now you don't have to use that horrible digital keyboard that comes with the iPad. Maybe it's because of my sweaty hands, but that thing just did not work for me. There were typos everywhere. I want to provide a more realistic example of what it looks like to figure out what you need based off of your own lifestyle and personal preferences. So here's my experience in a nutshell. Like I mentioned before, I started out at 17 with Photoshop and a blue Intuos art named Edie. A year and a half later, when I was serious about taking art classes, I bought a second-hand Intuos Pro Medium, which I used in conjunction with the iMac computer that I already had. I didn't realize it at the time, but I didn't have that much control over my line work. However, that became very evident to me during one art test I had for a job. It was rough. I didn't make it any easier on myself. After that, anything that required precise line art was done on my iPad using Procreate, and once they rolled out a few more features in Procreate later that year, I was pretty much sold. I used both Procreate and Photoshop for a couple years because during that time, the job I was at provided both Photoshop and a Cintiq, so I didn't really have to pay the subscription for Photoshop. But when I moved on from that job, I realized that there was literally no reason for me personally to go back to using Photoshop or a Cintiq. So now, as an independent illustrator who runs both a shop and a Patreon, edits videos, and just draws for fun, I've been able to identify some more of my needs. I love AirDrop, so I stick with Apple devices for an easy transference of files. I work from home, so sometimes it's worth it for me to spend a little extra money to get things in pretty colors that won't bore me to see every day, because I will see them on my days off. This is my current setup. I need to look at reference pictures often, so I connect my mouse and Magic Keyboard to both my monitor and my iPad at the same time. I can open references on one screen, draw on the other, and type on both. And I'm an extrovert, so having an iPad that allows me to work at a coffee shop on occasion has genuinely kept me sane. Now that you know my story, I'd love to know yours. If you're looking into using Procreate or any other software with advanced features, you might enjoy my video on how to use blend modes for your layers. And if this isn't the first video from me that you've watched all the way through, please consider subscribing. I'm here for you every week. Bye! That was a lot of work.